The year is 1943. World War II is raging at its peak. Nations are locked in a desperate struggle, exploring every possible avenue to gain an advantage over their enemies. In this feverish race, scientific research becomes a weapon in itself, a quest to forge technologies and armaments no one has ever possessed, to secure victory at any cost. Naturally, amidst this frantic innovation, some truly wild, almost insane ideas were born. One of the most audacious was the goal of making a highly valuable warship invisible to enemy radar, submarines, and even the naked eye. Yes, making a ship completely disappear. Camouflage has always been a cornerstone of military research, but this was something else entirely. While making an object invisible to radar is a technology we still develop today under the name of stealth, the legend we are about to explore speaks of true, literal invisibility to the human eye. Does it sound impossible? Of course it does. But let me tell you about the Philadelphia experiment, at least as the story first entered the public consciousness. As you listen, I want you to pay close attention to what your mind tells you, to the feelings that arise. We'll examine those feelings later. In October of 1943, at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in Pennsylvania, the U.S. military allegedly conducted a landmark experiment. The subject was a destroyer escort in its fleet, the USS Eldridge. The plan was built upon Albert Einstein's unified field theory. Massive, custom-built generators were installed on the ship, designed to generate an electromagnetic field so powerful it would bend light and radio waves around the vessel, rendering it invisible to both radar and sight. Similar, smaller-scale tests had reportedly been conducted during the summer of that year. But when the switch was thrown for the October experiment, something incredible and unforeseen was said to have happened. As the generators roared to life, a thick, eerie green fog enveloped the USS Eldridge. When the fog dissipated, the ship was gone. It had vanished. But its invisibility was not the most shocking part of the story. Over 200 miles away, in Norfolk, Virginia, sailors aboard another ship, the SS Andrew Furuseth, witnessed something that would defy all logic. Out of thin air, the USS Eldridge materialized in the waters before their very eyes, lingered for a few moments, and then vanished once more. Even more startling was the time recorded in the Norfolk ship's log. The event occurred a full 10 minutes before the Eldridge had disappeared from Philadelphia. In an attempt to create a cloaking device, they had accidentally stumbled upon both teleportation and time travel. Minutes later, the ship reappeared back in the Philadelphia shipyard, right where it had been. But the experiment had ended in a horrific tragedy. Of the crew members aboard during this spatio-temporal jump, some had simply vanished forever. Others had been found fused into the ship's metal bulkheads, their bodies embedded in the steel walls. Those who survived were driven completely insane. Following this disaster, the project was immediately shut down. The story goes that all witnesses were subjected to intense brainwashing and other methods to make them forget what they had seen. The Philadelphia experiment was buried, destined to become a ghost story whispered in the darkest corners of military lore, until, a decade later, it clawed its way back into the light. In 1955, an astronomer and author named Morris K. Jessup published a book titled The Case for the UFO. While not a bestseller, the book made waves in certain communities. Jessup, a scientist who believed in UFOs, was a valuable voice for the movement. and in his book, he speculated on the advanced technologies that might power such alien craft. The real story, however, begins with a reader, a man whose real name was Carl M. Allen, but who used the pseudonym Carlos Allende, sent Jessup a series of strange letters. In these letters, Allende described the Philadelphia experiment in vivid detail: the green fog, the ship's disappearance and reappearance, and the terrible fate of the crew. He claimed to have been a direct witness from the deck of the SS Andrew Furuseth and felt compelled to reveal the truth. Jessup was intrigued. Although skeptical, the story was so detailed and well constructed that he replied. However, in subsequent correspondence, Allende's claims grew wilder and more inconsistent. Jessup eventually dismissed him as a crank and ceased all communication. But the story didn't end there. In 1957, two officers from the Navy's Office of Naval Research, ONR, contacted Jessup. They had received a strange package in the mail. Inside was a copy of Jessup's book, The Case for the UFO, filled with handwritten annotations in its margins. The bizarre notes, written in 3 different colors of ink, appeared to be a conversation between 3 different beings who claimed to be extraterrestrials. These notes connected the UFO technology described in the book directly to the events of the Philadelphia experiment. When Jessup examined the book, he immediately understood. The strange handwriting, the erratic capitalization, and the peculiar punctuation were unmistakable. It was the work of Carl Allen. One might think the story would end here, perhaps with Carl Allen being admitted to a psychiatric hospital. If it had, we wouldn't be discussing it today. But there is one crucial detail that has allowed this theory to thrive for decades. 2 years after his visit from the ONR in 1959, Morris K. Jessup was found dead in his car, having committed suicide by routing the exhaust pipe into his vehicle. This detail changes everything, doesn't it? It plants a powerful seed of doubt. Was this tragic end truly a suicide? Or was it a sinister effort to silence him, a cover-up? The file remained dormant for years, but in 1984, a movie titled The Philadelphia Experiment brought the story roaring back to life. The film took liberties with the legend, telling the story of 2 sailors from the USS Eldridge who find themselves teleported 40 years into the future. The real twist came 4 years after the film's release. A man named Al Bielek watched the movie and claimed it triggered something in his mind. He came forward, alleging that his memories, which he said had been suppressed by the military, had suddenly returned. And Bielek's story was even stranger. He claimed that he had been an officer on the USS Eldridge during the 1943 experiment. He not only confirmed the event, but insisted he had been teleported to the year 2137. He also claimed involvement in the Montauk Project, an alleged continuation of the Philadelphia experiment focused on time travel, during which he visited the 28th century. What did he see? He described a world in the 2070s with a global population of only 300 million, ruled entirely by a master artificial intelligence. Finally, in 1994, a French astrophysicist and UFO researcher named Jacques Vallée wrote about the subject, asking anyone with information to come forward. A man named Edward Dudgeon responded, and his testimony finally brought a dose of reality to the story. Dudgeon had served in the Navy and was present at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in 1943. He confirmed that the Navy was indeed conducting experiments to make ships invisible. But here, we must distinguish between the colloquial meaning of the word and its military technical meaning. Dudgeon explained that the Navy was working on a technology called degaussing. This process involves surrounding a ship with a powerful electrical field to manipulate its magnetic signature. The goal wasn't to make the ship invisible to the eye, but to make it invisible to German magnetic mines and torpedoes, which were a major threat at the time. It was a standard, if advanced, defensive project. Dudgeon also had an explanation for the greenish fog. He said that a strong electrical field generated in a localized area can ionize the air, causing a phenomenon similar to lightning, or what is known as St. Elmo's fire, which is sometimes seen on the masts of ships or wings of aircraft during electrical storms. This phenomenon creates a glow that is typically more bluish than green. In essence, Carl Allende may have genuinely seen something, but the story he built around that observation was a flight of pure fantasy, a fantasy that became one of history's most enduring and widespread hoaxes. Let's be clear, governments absolutely conduct secret experiments. This was especially true during World War II, but for the Philadelphia experiment, as told by Allende, to be true, it would require us to ignore fundamental laws of physics. Now, let's look at the hard facts. The sole witness. The entire story originates from one man, Carl Allende. No other crew member from the USS Eldridge or the nearby SS Andrew Furuseth ever corroborated his account. To believe the story, the government would have had to successfully erase the memories of thousands of people in the Philadelphia and Norfolk areas. The physics, the instantaneous teleportation of an object the size of a warship, would involve a reorganization of matter at the atomic level. The energy release from such an event would be comparable to the detonation of multiple nuclear bombs. It would not have been a quiet, localized incident. It would have been a cataclysm. The ship's log. Official records are crucial in naval history. The ship's log for the USS Eldridge shows that during the alleged time of the experiment in October 1943, the ship wasn't even in Philadelphia. It was on its shakedown cruise in the waters around Brooklyn, New York. The science. The story leans heavily on Einstein's unified field theory. The problem is, this theory was never completed by Einstein and remains an unrealized dream of physics to this day. If any nation had discovered a working theory of everything, a key to the universe, they wouldn't have used it to cloak one ship and then bury the technology forever. A country that used the atomic bomb would not hesitate to leverage such a powerful discovery. The confession. In his later years, Carl Allende admitted that he had fabricated the entire story. While he later recanted his confession, his initial intent seems clear. Jessup's suicide. While his death fuels the conspiracy, Jessup's life was in turmoil. His later books failed to sell. His publisher had dropped him, and his wife had left him the year before his death. He was struggling with alcoholism and depression and had told friends he was considering suicide. So, if the story is so demonstrably false, why is it still talked about today? Why do millions still believe it? Because it's a fantastic story. The durability of these myths has less to do with evidence and more to do with human psychology. Our minds are drawn to mystery and the unknown. We naturally try to fill in the gaps in a story with our own beliefs and experiences. The narrative is a perfect cocktail of tantalizing elements: secret government experiments, advanced science based on a famous name like Einstein, tragedy, and a potential cover-up. These stories become a form of modern folklore, like tales of Area 51 or UFO sightings. They tap into our fascination with conspiracy theories and our distrust of authority, and pop culture loves them. The truth is, for the survival of a legend like this, the story's own magnetic pull is far more important than whether it's true or false. People often prefer to believe in stories that excite and challenge them rather than simply researching the facts. So what can we do in the face of this undeniable allure? The answer is simple. Think critically. Question your sources. Understand the motives of the person or institution providing the information. Adopt a scientific approach and look for verifiable evidence. And most importantly, learn to separate entertainment from education. Movies, books, and TV shows often use history and science as a starting point, but they exaggerate and change things for dramatic effect. Be open-minded, but maintain a healthy skepticism. In an age of information overload, this is the key to staying grounded. As much as these fantastical stories can inspire and entertain us, we must rely on logic and reason to understand the real world and to make true progress.